There's a cereal come to Wade County that's got people spending a little more time over breakfast. It's multigrain Cheerios. And hear people tell it, it's got a taste like no other. What with 4 tasty O's of corn, wheat, rice, and oats, it's multigrain and Cheerios good. Just goes to show you, people in Wade County, they know good when they taste it.
Pleasant trip, Mr. Conklin. Your room's ready. Full kitchen. Comfy living room with fireplace.
It's heaven.
We think so. After all, you'll be staying with us for quite a while.
Tell me, do all business travelers come here?
Oh, no. I'm afraid some are sent to other hotel rooms.
Residence Inn by Marriott, the extended stay hotel.
What I hear you and Charlie Black saying as the Republican spin on all this is our strategy is going to be to tell the voters, vote for the devil you know instead of the devil you don't know. We can't sell you George Bush, so we're going to demonize this other guy and make you think he'd be even worse.
Michael,
is that a fair summary?
Your despondency, as is the mood with most of the Democrats here, over Ross Perot dropping out is reflected in your language. You want to scream every time we talk about what Congress has failed to do. You want to scream every time we remind you that the president sent a growth package. You want to scream every time we talk about the reality of the tax increases and the spending increases in the plan,
taxes?
in the Clinton plan.
Who promised not to increase taxes?
Who held this country ransom until there was a tax increase in the budget? The Democratic Congress. You don't like hearing that, but the American public understands that's real.
Look.
Michael,
Yes,
you're speechless over the tax and spend commitment of this platform, and you keep saying tax increases are not tax increases.
In the platform, and I'm going to say this, I don't care how bored our viewers get every time you repeat that lie, the platform raises taxes on people making over 200,000, cuts taxes
but
on
has
ordinary
a net
middle-class
tax increase.
families.
Has a net tax increase. That's increasing taxes.
The average person gets a tax break in this Democratic
platform.
platform.
But they increase taxes and they spend multi-billions more. That's tax and spend.
That's another lie, because these revenue increases...
Michael, add them up.
These revenue increases are estimates from economic growth. Now, let me concede they may be baloney, but those are the same kinds of baloney that are in George Bush's budget year after year.
Clinton's plan has bigger tax increases than all the tax increases proposed by Dukakis and Mondale.
How is, let me ask
Add
you,
them up.
I'm through with this numbers, you just lie about it. How is the...
Michael, go add them up. Don't say that unless you know what you're talking about.
How is the strategy going to change, the Republican strategy going to change after as a result of today?
I think what happened today is that it makes this a clear two-man race, and I think it's a head-to-head race where people can focus on the reality of what it is than a fuzzy race that it would have been with Perot. And I think that's important for the public.
The last poll a couple days ago before Perot dropped out, however, it did pit Bush and Clinton against each other. It was Clinton 44, Bush 40. How do you explain that?
I think Clinton had to come out of here at least as strong as Dukakis, 17 points ahead. I don't think he's going to come out that strong.
That's your spin. If you're not 17 points
Carter
ahead, you're
was
a
34
loser.
points ahead and only won by 2. Dukakis was 17 points ahead and lost by a handful.
I agree. It's a tough fight ahead, but I'm a little bit optimistic. From the left, I'm Mike Kinsley. That's it for this Crossfire from this convention, but we'll be back at our regular spot tomorrow.
And from the right, looking for a traditional election, I'm John Sununu. Join us again tomorrow night for another edition of Crossfire, back from Washington.
Coming up next, more of Convention Day 4 from Madison Square Garden. Stay tuned.
It was such a pain coming home to a dark house, always feeling too hot or too cold. So we had Honeywell redo everything. Now the temperature's always comfortable, the lighting's taken care of, and we feel a lot safer. Even the air is cleaner. It's like living in a new house.
Honeywell, helping you control your world. Princess Cruises. It's more than a cruise. It's the love boat.
Nabisco shredded wheat. It's just good stuff.
This awful itch. Won't anything stop it fast?
Lanacane will. Lanacane shuts off the itch like a switch, fast. Only Lanacane cream works on contact with the itch nerves that cause every itch. Benadryl can't. Even the strongest hydrocortisones can't. But Lanacane will. So for the fastest relief of every itch, get Lanacane.
Lanacane does shut off the itch. Like a switch. Fast.
Lots of excitement in this hall, lots of excitement in the Republican Party ranks. Very frankly, both wings in this election year lusting after the Ross Perot supporters who have some place to go or hope to find some place to go as a result of Mr. Perot announcing that he would not run.
Yes, indeed. Comments. We see pictures here, live pictures of a rally in Dallas. Perot's supporters, you saw the sign there, Ross, you can't quit. Let's listen.
Loyal fan of Ross Perot for a very long time. And she happens to be Bernice Meyerson, who is Mark Meyerson's mother. Would you like to say a few words, Bernice? I would like to say is this: do not give up.
Meyerson's mother telling Ross not to give up. Let's check in now with Charles Bierbauer down on the podium, who's been gauging some of that Republican reaction. Charles?
Well, they're all, the Republicans and the Democrats, trying to figure out precisely where those Perot supporters will go, if indeed they go anywhere. One White House official I talked with today described the onion scenario. Let me explain it to you. An onion is, of course, made up of several layers. And in this scenario, the outer layer is largely soft Democratic voters in the Perot camp. And to some degree, those have already started to peel off. If you look at the latest polls, Governor Clinton's numbers have been rising. Some of that is attributed to the peel off, the peel away of that outer layer from Ross Perot. The second layer would be the soft Republican voters. And the hope, of course, in the Republican camp is that they will now peel back to President Bush. The third layer of that onion is the uncertain one, and no one is quite sure where they will go, whether they go to Clinton or Bush or simply stay away altogether. And even that's not as simple as, or that is almost too simple, because the description that I got was, well, really there are 50 onions out there. Consider each state separately. For example, in Massachusetts, the soft outer layer is Democratic, but in Utah, the soft outer layer of the onion is Republican. This is what the two campaigns will now try to do, to peel that onion back away from the Ross Perot core of supporters to get as many as they can. One other thought on this. For all the bad times that Ross Perot caused for George Bush, and he seemed to really put the Bush campaign into perplexity, for all the bad-mouthing that we have heard in past weeks from the Bush campaign, there was none of that today. They had been calling, the Republicans had been calling Ross Perot an autocrat, a tyrant. Today they're calling him a hero for bringing the consciousness higher in this race and then getting out of it. Back to you in the booth.
Thanks, Charles. And fresh from his latest round in Crossfire, John Sununu, who joins us now. John, let's take a look at the Republican strategy here. With 3 men in the race, clearly a 50-state strategy. How does it change now?
Well, I don't think the Republican strategy changes as much as I think the Democratic strategy has to change. I think the Democrats came into this convention thinking South-South, hoping perhaps to pick up California and New York to add to that, and hoping that with a little chemistry they'd pick up enough additional votes to get enough electoral votes. I think the president was always committed to a broad 50-state strategy. So in some sense, Ross Perot's dropping out makes it a little bit easier for the original Republican strategy to be followed. I think a little harder for the original Democratic strategy to be followed.
Well, I was reviewing some of the comments from various administration officials, Republicans. Clayton Yiter said it was a 50-state strategy. Now we see it as a 10 to 15. So maybe at least Bush advisors are thinking a little differently?
No, I think when they sit down and look at what the possibilities are, I think you're going to find a full 50-state strategy. The president has always had some very significant advantages in the South in terms of some of the issues and ideology. I think Governor Clinton tried to blunt that by a selection of a border state Democrat, Senator Gore. I think that was the approach they were taking. I think that's where the ripple is. I think what the other aspect, though, with that impact strategy is that the strategy on campaign rhetoric and campaign comparison changes drastically. You approach a three-person race very differently than a two-person race. You can actually run pro and con head-to-head, and I think it is less fuzzy, less convoluted, less difficult for the voters.
One of the interesting aspects is in terms of negative campaigning, because in a three-way race, oftentimes the negative campaigning only inures to the benefit of the third person involved. Is that going to heat the campaign up now that one's out?
Well, frankly, I think that the Clinton campaign was hoping that the Perot campaign would do the negative campaigning against the president. I think they're going to have to find out now that they're going to have to do their own dirty work if they're going to do any of that. I think in the presidential campaign, you're always going to find positive ads and negative ads. I think there's going to be a mix of that on both sides.
In looking at the states again, there was some comment about Texas is now in the Republican bag, Florida is now in the Republican bag. Is this something that Bush can take semi for granted?
I don't think he should take any
state.
Campaigning? I don't think the president should take any state for granted. I think he's got to allocate his resources efficiently in all those states, and he's got to work hard in all those states. I think he understands that. I think it changes a little bit of the distribution of spending on the Democratic side, who really have to sit down and figure out where they have a combination with this ticket to get enough electoral votes.
Let's bring Bernie in. Bernie?
John, how can Republicans keep a straight face? I'm thinking about the point Charles Bierbauer made before he came up here to the booth. How can you Republicans keep a straight face? On the one hand, you're practically blowing kisses at Perot supporters today, yet as recently as last week, all kinds of names were being sputtered out. The man was being trashed by everybody in the White House and the operatives within the Bush campaign team.
Bernie, look at the Democratic primaries. Same process. Very hot, very heavy, very personalized campaigning in many aspects of it. They come to a convention, they come together, and it's a love fest. It is not at all inconsistent with the American political system. You go hard, head-to-head, while you're in combat, and then when one candidate either wins or loses or drops out, you do the proper thing, and I think that's what's been done.
Thank you, Johnson and Catherine. Larry Woods now takes a look at the phenomenal Ross Perot campaign.
The maverick Texan who would be president unofficially entered the race, chatting with TV talk show host Larry King in Washington.
Number one, I will not run as either a Democrat or Republican, because I will not sell out to anybody but to the American people. And I will sell out to them.
Perot's unorthodox leap into the fast lane of presidential politics was a harbinger of things to come. He would do it his way or not at all. His way, as a curious nation would soon learn, had made H. Ross Perot a billionaire, and corralling this feisty self-made man into conventional politicking would not work.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have time to read it.
Smiling and confident, Perot began to take his case to the people, turning up on college campuses and television shows ordinarily ignored by the political pros.
How are you? Good to see you. Nice to see you all.
It didn't seem to matter that the Texarkana, Texas native spoke largely in generalities about what he would do to alter the nation's declining stock at home and abroad.
Flat tax. The Jerry Brown proposal, 13%.
I have not been able to study that in enough depth. Keep in mind.
When Ross talked, a great body of Americans listened and joined his team as a labor of love and faith. He would spend an estimated $10 million financing a campaign that lured odd bedfellows Ham Jordan and Ed Rollins to his side, and mostly volunteers got his name on 24 of 50 state ballots. Almost overnight, Perot pulled alongside President Bush and Democratic frontrunner Governor Bill Clinton in the polls. By June, he had nudged ahead among some of the pollsters, and for the first time in modern history, it appeared Americans were looking at a three-way race. Even the shadow of the little Texan, undeclared and unbossed, cast an uneasy spell over Clinton and Bush's strategy to counter Perot's popularity. But as the media and critics stepped up the pressure to bring Perot out in the open, on specific ways he would conduct business differently in Washington if elected, the initial cracks in the good ship Ross began to surface. His public appearances dwindled. Evasion smothered exactitude on the thorny issues troubling voters. Rumors filtered out of Dallas. Dissension was in the ranks. The Bush camp finally sicked Dan Quayle on parole, calling him a, quote, temperamental tycoon, unquote. Others charged he would run roughshod over the Constitution if he was elected president. Then came that slip of the lip comment before the NAACP, which met in Nashville last week. Once referring to blacks as you people, a self-prepared speech, the aftershock seemed to have cracked Perot's foundation. Miffed, uncertain, and fed up, as he privately admitted, Perot became exasperated with his quest, at times overruling Ed Rollins and Ham Jordan on critical campaign tactics. Rollins resigned in frustration, taking 10 aides with him. And so the man who seemingly thrived on causes saw cause in mid-July to turn and walk away. That decision will be debated for months, but one thing is already apparent. We got ourselves an old-fashioned two-way race again. Larry Woods, CNN, New York.
And more coverage from the Garden right after this.
CNN's coverage of the 1992 Democratic National Convention is brought to you in part by your local cable operator.
MPI Business Systems and Sharp Copiers. The winning combination for more copier performance. Sharp Copiers, winner of the Buyers Lab Most Outstanding High Volume Copier of 1991 Award. Winner of Hanson's Guidelines Platinum Award for 5-year Best Buy. Add the documented local service support of MPI Business Systems, and you've got more productivity, more value. MPI Business Systems and award-winning Sharp Copiers, the winning combination.
Hey, you know me? I ran for mayor of Washington, D.C. in 1990. And law. I believe in freedom of expression. I'm a blue-collar worker. And now I'm running for president in 1992. And if you don't vote, I just might win.
Call Russell at home, 202-232-7958.
Button.
When it comes to health care, Americans want change. So do we. We're America's private health insurers. Voters tell us being sick today shouldn't mean canceled coverage tomorrow. We agree. Voters tell us if they have coverage through their job and something happens, you shouldn't also lose your health insurance. We agree. And we're supporting reforms in step with these important American beliefs. HIAA, Prescriptions for Change.
A change from traditional waterways. A change from traffic jams. A change from man-made amusement rides. And yet, a place where some things never change. This summer, escape to West Virginia. Call for your free travel guide. West Virginia. It really is a welcome change.
You're watching Beyond Gavel to Gavel coverage of the Democratic Convention on CNN.
From Madison Square Garden in New York, the site of the Democratic National Convention, here are CNN's Bernard Shaw and Catherine Cryer.
Welcome back. Well, I guess we don't have to worry about any more of that new math. We're back down to a two-man race.
The game is over indeed. Bill Clinton awakened this morning, still thinking this would be a three-man race, but at 11 o'clock this morning Eastern Time in Dallas at his headquarters, Ross Perot stepped to the podium and said, "I am not going to run." Two basic reasons cited by him. He said the Democrats meeting here in Madison Square Garden, to use his word, had revitalized themselves. And he said, were he to enter this race, the race would end up in the House of Representatives. Perot claiming he wants to do the best for his country, therefore he is not going to run.
Well, President Bush talked to Ross Perot this morning, held a couple of news conferences from his vacation site in Wyoming. This is what he had to say.
I would welcome his support and the support of those who have gotten behind him. We share the same principles with many of those people, and we're going to work hard to win them over, get their support. But it was a good phone call, and I probably will be talking to Mr. Perot again before too long. But I see this as a positive development in a sense, because I am convinced that the conservatives who are supporting Ross Perot, the legions of conservative people, will end up being with me.
Just a short time ago, Ken Bodie and I, from this anchor booth, spoke live with Morton Meyerson, a longtime Ross Perot supporter, and Hamilton Jordan, the remaining co-chair after Ed Rollins resigned yesterday. This is what these two men had to say. First, Meyerson.
It would surprise me greatly if Ross endorsed anybody. I don't think that he would think in those terms. He said during his press conference that when he went into the booth, he'd be a private citizen and who he voted for would be his business. I think that he might try to get certain ideas onto the table, but I don't think he will endorse either of the players.
I can show you hundreds of calls and faxes from people who say they're going to vote for him anyway, or they're glad that he brought them into the system. I regret people that do feel disappointed, and certainly there are those people out there that feel that way. I saw on CNN an interview from Sherman Oaks, California, where a group of Perot volunteers were disappointed on one hand that he was getting out of the race, but expressed appreciation that he had brought them into the political process. So we'll know in a few days how this all shakes out. Yeah. But we certainly, the unpleasant part of Ross's decision is that some people would be disappointed. I was disappointed as a citizen that he got out.
Our floor reporters have been down talking to delegates to determine the effect of this withdrawal on the various regions. Candy Crowley is checking out the effect in the South. Candy.
Catherine, a little bit of history, as in recent history, like a couple of days ago, where a lot of Southern delegates were telling us that they were grateful Ross Perot was in the race. The theory then was that Ross Perot could take away some of those conservative Southern voters who liked his take-no-prisoners stance, and those were deemed to be Bush voters. There was a feeling that in some states in the South, which have not gone Democrat in many, many years, would go Democrat this year because of the split. That's the revisionist history. Let me give you the spin from this floor today. And that is that many of the people we have talked to in the Southern delegations, such as Louisiana and Mississippi, Florida, geographically Southern, if not in the heart Southern, have said, look, Perot constituents were one thing, non-status quo, and George Bush is status quo. They see no way that Perot voters, even the hardcore, are going to go over to George Bush. Senator John Breaux of Louisiana, we spoke to just a little while ago, he said they're going to do one of two things. They're going to vote for Clinton or they're going to stay home. That, of course, is the view from this floor, and you have to remember that this is a group of the true believers who are not about to say anything about Bill Clinton, anything bad about Bill Clinton. I will tell you that Senator Breaux believes that these voters are there for Clinton to attract. He believes tonight is a very big deal. He says he spoke to Governor Clinton earlier today and, quote, Clinton is as nervous as a cat. John Breaux said what he advised Clinton was to stress the middle-of-the-road platform that the Democrats now have and the feeling that they are now more towards the middle and therefore can attract those voters. Back to Bernie in the booth.
Thank you, Candy. Everybody in this hall has an opinion about what Ross Perot said today, and certainly each opinion is valid down there on the floor. Let's go to the Western region. Gene Randall has been talking to delegates from that part of the United States.
Well, Bernie, certainly California is the key to the West, and it is a key to Democratic chances in November. In a poll based on a three-man field last week in California, Bill Clinton stood at 31%, George Bush at 29%, Ross Perot at 28%. Given the margin of error, a virtual dead heat. The state's Democratic chairman, Phil Angelides, tells me It'll take a special Clinton campaign effort to convince Perot voters in California they should now turn to Bill Clinton as their new agent of change. Angelides says for now at least, Perot's decision has cleared the air, giving Bill Clinton a clear opportunity to define himself to the American people, and especially to Ross Perot's voters, as the only remaining candidate of change in the field. Bottom line in California, it would have been tough for Bill Clinton with Ross Perot in the field. It'll be tough for Bill Clinton with Ross Perot out of the field. In Colorado, a state legislator told us there is an opportunity for Clinton's people to go after Ross Perot's grassroots organization. But he told us, and this is important, it'll take a door-to-door approach to do that, personal politicking. In the state of Washington, we heard much the same thing. One delegate told us it is the beginning of a long, tough process for the Clinton campaign. Ross Perot's decision, the consensus here, not to run gives Bill Clinton an opportunity, but one he must skillfully exploit in the weeks and months ahead. Catherine?
Thanks, Gene. Now let's hear the mood in the Midwest here in this hall. Deborah Potter. Deborah?
Catherine, the mood in the Midwest, much as elsewhere, is to make the best of this. Before the announcement that Ross Perot was dropping out, delegates freely admitted that they felt better in a three-way race. They thought they had a better chance. They thought Ross Perot was drawing support from George Bush in the Midwest. Now they're saying, at least to some extent, they hope they can get those voters over because those voters were dissatisfied voters, and particularly in states like Illinois and Michigan, where unemployment is well above the national average, where farm income has plummeted under the Reagan and Bush administrations. They say, these Democrats say, that they believe they can reach out to those disaffected voters because there's no way they're going to go back to George Bush. In the words of the state party chairman in Michigan, Perot was a way station, a safe haven on the way off the Titanic. As he put it, there's no way they'll go back to a sinking ship. The question, of course, will they go anywhere or will they stay home? In Illinois, one member of Congress said, this is win-win for us because if they stay home, they were Bush voters who won't vote. If they come over to us, of course, we strengthen our hand. So the question out here is, can Bill Clinton tonight appeal to those Perot voters? I can tell you in my section of the floor, already there are hand-lettered signs going up, welcome Perot supporters. Bernie?
Deborah? Let's go to the Northeast now and call in Frank Sesno for an idea of what people are saying in that part of the country.
Well, in the Northeast, there's no way you're going to find a long face at this convention. This is Bill Clinton's night and the Democrats' night, and there's no one here who wants anybody, Ross Perot especially, to rain on the parade. Nonetheless, people concede that this very, very substantially changes the mathematics. In Connecticut, for example, a state that continues to reel from the recession that has really clobbered the Northeast, Ross Perot was seen taking that state in a poll just a couple of weeks ago. In state after state throughout the Northeast, New York included, it's been a very tight, close three-way race up until just a few weeks ago. But that dynamic has been changing. So what do they say? In Connecticut, for example, the sort of state where Ross Perot had great appeal and where Bill Clinton is making a particular pitch, a wealthy state, a suburban state, a middle-class state, to talk to the delegates here, they insist that Bill Clinton is still very much in it. A Democrat hasn't taken Connecticut, for example, since 1968 in the presidential race. They see some real openings. The real estate market has been clobbered, and Bill Clinton is talking change, change, change. We'll hear it here tonight, and the delegates here anyway say they believe, they hope, that will appeal and have broad appeal in this election campaign. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but they're sure putting a good face on it. Back to the booth.
Thanks, Frank. Well, during the week, our Jeff Flock has been traveling around the Midwest across the state of Oklahoma of late, trying to gauge the mood. Well, he's been checking in at various Perot volunteer headquarters today, and now he's in Waurika, Oklahoma. Jeff?
Catherine, our week-long tour of Oklahoma is now about complete. We have been in big towns and small towns all over this country. Tonight, we are in Waurika, Oklahoma, the smallest town on our tour, but we have the largest group so far. We've convened something of a town meeting here in Waurika to get a sense for what's going through their minds. As you mentioned earlier today, at Ross Perot headquarters in downtown Oklahoma City, it was not a happy scene there. Perhaps you can see the pictures of folks sitting around the monitors and watching as Ross Perot shocked many of them, that woman in particular there, shocked them by announcing that he was withdrawing. The phones began to ring as soon as that announcement was made at Perot headquarters, with various Perot folks saying that they wanted him to continue the race. They were very upset and disappointed. In this crowd tonight, we have some Perot volunteers and supporters who, well, I don't know, I'll let them speak for themselves. Ma'am, give me a sense for what went through your mind when you heard he was leaving the race.
Well, I just wish he could have stayed longer, or would have.
Why?
Well, he has done so much for the political scene. As far as I am concerned, he's awakened a lot of people to things that we can take care of that we have just let slide by before.
Ma'am, your thoughts?
I was disappointed that he withdrew from the race. But I think he has made them aware in Washington that the natives are just getting a little bit restless.
You're restless? Who are you leaning toward?
I have not decided yet.
Do you have a leaning at this point?
Yes, Clinton and Gore, because of Gore.
Because of Gore. Tell me more.
Well, I just respect him a little more than I do Clinton.
Okay. Let's move across. We've got another gentleman over here I know who's a Perot backer, and we've got folks backing different folks in this audience tonight. Disappointment?
Yes. I wish he'd have stayed in.
Do either of the candidates who are still in have anything that would attract you?
Not as much as I would like. I would probably go with Bush now, though.
Okay. We wanted to give the dissenting view here. Sir, I know we talked earlier, and we indicated that perhaps you had more negative feelings about Mr. Perot and more positive feelings about him leaving the race. What goes through your mind about him?
Well, I don't think that a billionaire can represent the common people. I don't think he has a lot in common with people like us. He has claimed to be an outsider, and he's not an outsider. He had 72 meetings with Richard Nixon. We spent a little time in Germany getting rid of the Nazis, and I'm glad to see him go back to Texas where he belongs.
Okay. I detect that's about the nastiest thing you can say to somebody in Oklahoma. Where are you leaning? Are you leaning anywhere else?
I'm not leaning. I'm for Clinton and Gore.
Okay. I want to get to a few more Perot backers. Stike, follow me over here. Where do you go now? You supported Ross Perot. I take it that was a move, a major leap for you. Are you registered Democrat?
Yes. I'm disappointed that Perot did pull out of the race, but I feel like that if he's opened our eyes, made us more aware that we need to pay attention to the candidates, to what they're standing for, and make our decision based on what their feelings are and what they're going to do for America, rather than standing behind a particular party.
I would ask you also, ma'am, do you feel he's gone for good now? Is he out at our campaign headquarters this morning? There was a lot of sentiment that perhaps he could be talked back into it. He was talked into it once. Do you think so, and should he be talked back into it?
I think he should be talked back into it, but I don't believe he'll consent to. And I'm very disappointed because I've been a supporter since day one.
Okay, the word from Oklahoma among Perot's supporters. That is the latest from here. We'll be checking in periodically throughout this evening with this town meeting in Waurika, Oklahoma. For now, I'm Jeff Locke, CNN, reporting live from Waurika.
Pretend you are Bill Clinton. What would be going through your mind? How would you be feeling now as you approach coming into this hall and delivering your nomination speech, accepting your party's nomination? We just heard Candy Crowley quote Senator John Breaux of Louisiana saying Bill Clinton is nervous as a cat. For an idea of what this night will look like, let's go down to our podium guy, Charles Bierbauer.
Well, that cat has a few more hours to sit on his nerves, Bernie, because there is other business to attend to here at the Democratic Convention. Governor Jim Florio of New Jersey is at the podium now. There's a series of speakers laying out elements of the Clinton agenda on the economy, on the environment, on education, all kind of a warm-up to the main event, which will come later this evening. There will be some other speakers that we will hear from, Governor Wilder of Virginia, Congressman Gephardt of Missouri, Senator Mitchell of Maine. And then at about 8 o'clock, Senator Barbara Mikulski of Maryland will place in nomination the name of her Senate colleague, Albert Gore, to become the vice presidential nominee of the Democratic Party. There will be, or there was at least, a second nominating petition submitted. Former Massachusetts Governor Endicott Peabody submitted his name. He gathered up the 300 at least necessary signatures and submitted his name to be nominated for vice president. Former Governor Peabody has withdrawn that petition. He will get a few minutes to speak to explain why he thinks the vice president should be elected separately from the president. And then Kathy Vick, the secretary of the convention, will start with that roll call. Alabama, she will say, and Alabama, we are told, will pass to Tennessee. Tennessee, the home state of Senator Gore, and Tennessee will move that the senator be named the vice presidential nominee by acclamation, and it's doubtful that there will be much opposition to that. We'll then hear from Senator Gore. We'll hear from Governor Clinton. The balloons will fall from the rafters, and we'll all go home. Bernie?
Thank you very much, Charles. When we come back, William Schneider and Ken Bodie have been working the telephones. They've been buzzing through the halls, and we'll hear what they have to report.
And a bit later, one of the three who helped Governor Clinton select his vice presidential running mate, Vernon Jordan.
CNN's coverage of the Democratic National Convention is brought to you by Chrysler Plymouth, a division of the Chrysler Corporation, proud sponsor of the 1992 U.S. Olympic team. And by Merrill Lynch. We have the knowledge and the resources to provide you the answers you need. Merrill Lynch. We're bullish on the future.
Chrysler Fifth Avenue at $22,000, the perfect balance between self-indulgence and common sense.
Now get $1,500 cash back on Chrysler Fifth Avenue.
As Nancy Walsh saves for her son's education, her savings and those of millions like her are invested in business. When business grows, our nation prospers and becomes more competitive in the world, which could open up a world of opportunities. And who will be there seeking out those opportunities for you and Nancy Walsh? Merrill Lynch. We're bullish on the future.
Who are you going to call the most this month?
Most?
Good question. Isabel. With Sprint's new program, The Most, you'll automatically save on whoever you call the most each month.
I call my lawyer the most.
You'll save even more when the person you call the most is another Sprint customer.
My Claire, she lives in Arkansas. I don't know.
So now it's easy to save on whoever you call the most.
My brother-in-law, Paul, or Bob.
Even if you have no idea who that is.
I'm sorry. I just can't get over these Republicans who, through everything but satchel charges under Ross Perot's bed, have been doing so ever since it became a factor. And now Ken Bodie and Bill Schneider, everybody is running after Perot supporters.
It's absolutely frantic. Here's the president on vacation. He's going fishing. He rushes in. He makes telephone calls. He has a press conference. They are frantically trying to get the Perot supporters. And they really are up for grabs because George Bush said the Perot supporters are conservatives. I call them recovering Bushaholics. Most of them voted for George Bush, but they're very angry because they feel betrayed by George Bush. George Bush wants them back. On the other hand, they do feel betrayed. They want change, and Bill Clinton thinks he has a chance to get them. They're both going after them at the same time, and it's frantic.
We don't know what the Democrats are going to do tonight about this. Bill Clinton, we know there are just very few opportunities left for the Democrats to have a crack at the Perot people in this convention. Bill Clinton's speech, embargoed until delivery, so we won't say any more about it than just this. There is no mention of Ross Perot in this speech right now. So if you hear it tonight in the speech, folks, that means they've added it since they released this speech.
One quote.
Yeah. There is one thing that I think is interesting about the Perot phenomenon. In a way, this is the triumph of professional politics. You know, Perot was a businessman. He wasn't a politician. His followers were volunteers. They weren't professionals. Now, in a way, the system won. Professional politicians, Perot wouldn't listen to them. And there's something very sad about this because, you know, a lot of Americans hate professionalism. They don't want to be governed by professional politicians. They don't want professionals running their campaigns. They want room for volunteers, for citizen politicians, for amateurs, for activists. And the failure of the Ross Perot campaign says something very sad about our politics.
2 points. I think that as long as Ross Perot was a factor, in a sense, he provided cover for Bill Clinton. That cover is gone now. Now he's right in the middle with George Bush. Another point, I think that retail politics, nose-to-nose, hand-to-hand campaigning, doorbell ringing, will be just as important as spending millions for television advertising.
Well, you know, Bernie, I think what we're going to see is a lot fewer people vote now than would have voted if Ross Perot were in this thing. Unless something happens. I mean, we're in a very pregnant moment right now. We don't know whether these volunteers are going to accept this decision, try to keep him on the ballot or what have you. But if, in fact, he's out, I think we're going to be back to a standard turnout like we've had in the past few elections, which means fairly low turnout.
Well, it was interesting in reading some of the comments today from the Bush officials. One of them was, well, Perot silenced Clinton for a couple of months and really had the focus. And yet the reverse has been true building up to the convention, that all of a sudden Bill Clinton, as Bush and Perot took each other on, had a voice for issues, had a voice to act presidential, got away from the fight with George Bush. Did that help him out in the long run?
Well, yes. I mean, the focus has certainly been on Bill Clinton here and coming up to the convention. What typically happens to independent and third-party candidates is they get ignored over the summer. That was beginning to happen to Perot. We have the convention, the Democratic convention now. We have the Republicans next week. Usually third-party and independent candidates decline over the summer because no one's paying them any attention. I think Ross Perot really did contribute to major changes in American politics. Ken said it, we're going to have more volunteerism. Look at the way he changed the use of the media. He has made a difference in our politics, and we're going to see it this year.
With Perot going out, does this campaign, the head-to-head between Bush and Clinton and Gore and Quayle, does this campaign become nasty quicker?
Yes. My view is it does. I think in a three-man race, it's more difficult to discover if you attack one fellow, are you going to get the support that's peeled off, or is your opponent, your third opponent, going to get that kind of support? This time, I think it's going to be right back to the same pattern of politics we've seen before, which again, I think, is going to contribute to people being turned off and turnout continue to go down. These are radical predictions to be making only a few hours after Perot is out of the race.
Look at the center of this convention. It's all been Bush bashing about how terrible the status quo is. And what is George Bush? What are his options? He can argue that things are pretty good, but who believes that? He can argue that he's the candidate of change, but that doesn't sound too credible. Or he could say, my opponent is unacceptable.
And interestingly enough, it also looks like the Bush administration is going to pick up the campaign schedule and begin their activities prior to Houston, certainly prior to Labor Day,
I'll tell you,
take on Bill Clinton.
If George Bush waits until after the Republican convention, if Bill Clinton and Al Gore come out of this hall slashing and burning, Bush is going to suffer.
And you know where he's going? He's going to the South. He says, let them go to the West. The South is my base. He wants to consolidate the South.
All right, we will continue this discussion shortly. Stay with us.
Sasol, that giant on the continent of Africa, is not only the world leader in sophisticated oil from coal technology, but is also the world's biggest supplier of chemicals from coal. These petrochemicals are marketed through a specialist division of Sasol called Sasol Chem, supplying more than 80 different products to most countries of the world. To adequately serve the needs of overseas customers, Sasol Chem has established a global marketing infrastructure comprising distributors and local marketing divisions. All Sasol Chem products are derived from coal. One of these is Sasol's range of unique waxes. Of rare purity and stability, Sasol wax is highly sought after in all industrialized countries, where it is used in a vast variety of applications. But not only is coal turned into synthetic wax, other Sasol Chem products include ethylene, the most important building block of the petrochemical industry, as well as phenolics and solvents, such as alcohols and ketones, serving a large number of industries. And at Sasol, our scientists are continuously researching new applications or developing new products for Sasol's unique intermediates. Whether it is 1 drum of paint thinner or 1,000 tons of acetone, Sasol Chem is there with quality service and technological know-how to serve your needs. Sasol, coal, oil, petrochemicals, a true giant on the African continent.
Ross Perot, as we know, at 11 o'clock Eastern Time roughly today, announced that he would not run for President of the United States. Yesterday, his co-chair, Ed Rollins, announced that he was pulling out, and with him, he took many key people he had brought on board. Today, Ed Rollins limped back to Washington. At National Airport, he was asked whether he would support a Republican or a Democrat.
They've had a pretty good week. I don't think that Bill Clinton has to worry about any distractions at this point in time. I mean, he has to worry about giving a good speech tonight to top Jesse Jackson's and Mario Cuomo's. But my sense is that he's had a very good week, and I think their campaign is together, and I think that they're prepared for a good fall campaign. I think that they're ahead of the Bush campaign that obviously still has some problems, and so I don't think that this in any way, shape, or form takes anything away from their efforts.
Where do you go for now?
Beg pardon?
Are you one trying to support Bush?
I'm a Republican. I mean, obviously, I would have supported the president before. It was just that there was another option, and I thought that Mr. Perot and the movement was an opportunity to change the American political system. That's why I got into it. I'm a Republican. I obviously have some disappointments in some of the things that the president has done, as have a lot of other Republicans. But that's my home. That's where I go back to. So.
Meaning you will support President Bush?
I'll vote for the president.
Do you expect to be asked back into the fold?
I think I've been excommunicated, and I don't know how long I have to say my prayers before I get back in. But that's irrelevant. I'll support him, and I'll vote for Republicans. I've always said I'll help Republicans.
Back here in Madison Square Garden, Frank Sesno is in the Connecticut delegation.
Indeed I am, Bernie, and I'm talking with Peter Hart, a Democratic pollster. It's your job to look at the numbers and crunch the numbers. Every delegate here, whether they want to put a good spin or bad on it, says this very much changes the mathematics of this heretofore imagined three-way race. In your estimation, your analysis, how?
Well, I think it changes it greatly. Take a deep breath. But the first thing to know is if you take the Perot core voters right down to that reducible margin, the 3/4 of them basically say, I don't particularly love Clinton and I don't particularly love Bush. So the idea that they're there to be scooped up easily is not a fact. It's going to take a lot of work. What Clinton has going for him, he has the message of change, which will help him, and the people have reached an opinion on the economy, and the economy's not working. Tonight, Bill Clinton has a chance to reach them on the economy as well as who he is.
Drive south, though, for a minute, and throughout the southern states, delegates and political hardballers I've been talking to here say they've been depending upon Ross Perot to take a solid 20% of the vote, preferably the conservative white vote that's presumed to go to Bush, and now that's not going to happen, which puts Clinton's campaign in much more of an uphill climb.
Well, I think the whole electoral map changes because you take the West Coast, and that goes towards the Democrats at this stage of the game. The South's going to be a little bit harder, but you've got the right ticket to put together the South, and I think that makes a lot of difference.
But the bottom line is this makes this a much tougher campaign for Clinton. What do you think he needs to do? You said the word change a couple of times. What message needs to come to connect with these undecideds?
I think as much as anything, he has to let them know who he is, where he comes from, and give them a sense of what he'll do on the economy. They want to change. He can reach them. The other thing is George Bush has a steep uphill fight, and let me simply say he's reaching in for the emperor's new clothes. They know that there's no suit there.
Thanks for the spin, Doctor.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the booth and Bernie.
How can I put this? Before Al Gore could get the right to address these delegates tonight, to deliver his acceptance speech and become the Democrats' vice presidential nominee, he had to go through a couple clearances. When we come back, Catherine Cryer will be talking with Vernon Jordan, one of the men advising Governor Clinton as to who should be his running mate. Back in a moment after this local cable break.
CNN's live coverage of the Democratic National Convention will continue after these messages from your local cable operator. Listening? We are. We're America's private health insurers. Americans tell us they're feeling squeezed by soaring health care costs. Well, we're doing something about it. We're negotiating savings and discounts with doctors, hospitals, and drug companies. We're eliminating costly paperwork, streamlining. We're insisting on new ways of providing care and demanding cost consciousness, more efficiency from everyone in the system. HIAA, prescriptions for change.
Atop the French Alps, a drop of water began a journey. Over time, the mountains enriched the water. Only after 15 years could it be called Evian. Pure, balanced Evian natural spring water. Like the U.S. Olympic athlete, to be the best takes time.
We now return to CNN's live coverage of the Democratic National Convention.
From Madison Square Garden in New York, the site of the Democratic National Convention, here are CNN's Catherine Cryer and Bernard Shaw.
Welcome back, and joining me now, the former head of the National Urban League and one of 3 committee members that assisted Bill Clinton in choosing his vice presidential nominee, Senator Al Gore. Mr. Jordan, it's a logical choice to many that Al Gore from the South would be part of the ticket in a 3-way race. What about now that Ross Perot is pulled out? Make any sense?
I don't think that it makes any difference. This decision was not based on geographical preference. It was based on 2 things. Who would best succeed to the presidency in the event that that awful thing would happen. That criteria was applied to Al Gore. And the second was compatibility. I've seen them together. The chemistry works. They're friends. They care about the same things, and they coincidentally come from the same area.
Well, one might be a little skeptical about that being a complete answer, because certainly in this particular race, you're looking at a situation where the Republicans have held the South now for 3 elections, where Ross Perot is certainly very strong in that area, and many say those 2 would off-balance each other. The Clinton-Gore ticket can come in and take the South, and that made a lot of sense. Was that not a factor at all in
I don't think that was a factor at all. I think the factors were those 2, skepticism notwithstanding, that outlined that he wanted a vice president who could, in his mind and in the mind of the nation, succeed him in that awful event. And secondly, he wanted a running mate with whom he felt comfortable and compatible. Those were the overriding issues. I do not believe that the South could be the main criteria for his selection, because the South is just a part of the nation. I also think that regional basis for making a vice presidential decision is now gone out of the window. As a Southerner myself, I really believe that the selection of Al Gore says to all of us that the Civil War is over and that we really are one nation under God.
All right, but looking back at the South, one more question. Can the Clinton-Gore ticket carry Dixie now that Ross Perot is out of the race?
I assumed in my own mind that Ross Perot would fade at some point. He's faded earlier than I had anticipated, and it was always clear to me that this ticket could carry the nation, and in the process carry the South. I thought it was true before Ross Perot got out, and I think it's true today.
There are blocks of voters that we talk about consistently. The women voters, the minority voters. We heard from Jesse Jackson, we heard from Charlie Rangel, we heard from Maxine Waters saying why were minorities not considered, and certainly was Maxine a minority or a woman? Why weren't at least those names floated among the populace?
They were considered. We started out with a list of 40 people. That was a narrowed list, and I'm not going to tell you who was on that narrowed list. But as a minority, as a black, as one who cares and who has spent his life dealing with diversity, I am satisfied with this ticket.
Well, take us through the evaluation process, because certainly the country is trying to get to know Al Gore, if they don't, to understand the process. What was it that turned the tide for him, in your opinion?
Well, that question you have to ask the governor. Our job.
But you made advice. You gave advice to the governor.
No, we gave information, basically, and research. The ultimate decision was with the governor, Mr. Christopher, Governor Cunin, and I did not say, Governor Clinton, you have to take Al Gore, or you have to take so-and-so or so-and-so. We said, here are the people, here that you wanted us to look at, here they are. And here are their ideas, here is their background, and the decision is yours. And I can tell you truthfully, without fear of contradiction, that it was his decision. And I'm really proud of that, because it's the most important decision that he's had to
Certainly
make.
it would be his decision,
Sure.
but he looked at the three of you as advisors on this issue. What was your advice to him?
Our advice was, here they are, Governor. And we talked about pros and cons, obviously, but I did not, Warren Christopher did not, and Madeline Cunin did not say, Gore is your man as opposed to X being your man. That decision was made by the governor.
All right, what were the cons of Al Gore?
They are obvious. You've seen him. He's able.
No, the cons.
He's articulate.
You said
The cons?
you've got pros, but what were the negatives?
I had no negatives, and I have none now. He is our nominee, and I think that this new generation of young Americans who happen to be from the South are going to carry the nation, and they're going to carry my native South.
Any concern about older voters? You've got a young, white, moderate Southern ticket here. Many say it's now sort of the baby boomers over the World War II generation. How does this ticket appeal? And were you concerned at all, not only in terms of possibly the region, but in terms of age and balancing this ticket?
Given what I think to be the disenchantment of America with the current administration, and I think that George Bush created the Perot candidacy. I think the Perot candidacy is a direct result of the ineptitude of this administration. So I think that older voters will not look at these two bright people with experience. They've been in office for a very long time, and I don't think they're going to look at them as unable to lead this nation.
What about Tipper Gore? Many looked at Hillary. She's been receiving some criticism, concerned about this working woman who may or may not have at least perceivedly spent enough time with the family, and yet here was Tipper, who personified, for many, family values. Was this a response to Dan Quayle?
Yeah, our job was not to evaluate spouses or to do research on spouses. Our job was to recommend to the governor potential candidates for vice president, and that's what we did.
What about the likes of Lee Hamilton, certainly Senator Bob Kerrey, Harris Wofford, some of the other names that were floated up to the last minute?
All very able Americans.
Why not those names?
Any one of whom, in my judgment, and I believe in the governor's judgment, could have served very ably as vice president. To sum it up, that was one choice, one telephone call, and one affirmative answer.
There are some that look at this ticket and say, why was it not reversed? Why did Al Gore choose not to run this time? Wouldn't it be a better ticket? Is that going to hurt Bill Clinton at all?
I don't think it's going to hurt Bill Clinton at all. Al Gore made a decision not to run for president. Bill Clinton made a decision to run for president. And when he got to the vice presidential selection process, he asked Al Gore, and Al Gore said yes.
This is a new strategy to take on two from the same region, two men who some describe as mirror images of one another. What does the Democratic ticket have to do, this ticket, to expand nationally, to appeal to the electorate as a whole?
Well, this convention behind us here is not just made up of Southerners. All 50 states are here. It's a very diverse group. And it seems to me that it says something about the nation that we could set aside geographical criteria and go for the best in the party. I think we've done that. We're proud of it. And I think it's a winning ticket.
Well, you're also hearing, though, from the likes, again, of Jesse Jackson and others, that the traditional base may be being ignored. The cities, labor, workers, that old-time Democratic politics is changing, and this ticket reflects that. Is that true?
But as I look out over this group, I see labor there, I see women there, I see blacks there, very much involved in this campaign, very much involved in this process. They're all Democrats, they're all under the tent. And I don't see any peculiar difference from now as in the past. I think it's going to be just fine.
All right. Well, Vernon Jordan, thanks very much for coming in and sharing your views with us. And coming up, Virginia Governor Doug Wilder will be speaking to the delegates. Stay with us.
There's no guarantee that what goes up must come down, that it takes two to tango, or that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. But there's one guarantee you can always count on, the new McDonald's guarantee. Our promise of hot food, fast, friendly service, and drive-through orders double-checked to be right. If not, we'll make it right, or your next meal is on us. What you want is what you get. Some things in life are guaranteed. McDonald's today.
Sharp. What you need is sharp. What you need in fax is
sharp. Sharp thinking about business.
It made us #1 in fax sales. Created the world's first desktop
color fax.
Color fax.
Sharp.
And the affordable, high-quality laser plain paper fax.
Sharp thinking about fax.
The right fax at the right time, right now. From the number one in fax 5 years in a row.
Sharp thinking about business.
Research has shown that if you confine an animal in a small space for an extended period of time, he will become an animal. But put him in a big room with comfortable furniture, full kitchen, and a home-like atmosphere, and he'll become almost human. Something to consider on your next extended business trip. Residence Inn by Marriott, the extended stay hotel.
Won't anything stop this itching fast?
Lanacane shuts off every itch, like a switch. Only Lanacane works on contact with itch nerves that cause every itch. Not Benadryl, not hydrocortisone.
Lanacane does shut off the itch, like a switch, fast.
Tomorrow, why did Perot fail? How does America feel about it? On Morning News. Later, she pushed family values before Republicans made it an issue. Tipper Gore on Cryer and Company. All tomorrow on CNN.
The name of the governor from the Commonwealth of Virginia is Doug Wilder. When this convention first started, there were all kinds of question marks about whether or not Governor Wilder would speak. Earlier in an interview on CNN, he indicated that he told Chairman Ron Brown that he came here not wanting any favors or anything like that, wasn't expecting anything. And we had the governor, you remember the interview, we had him here in the anchor booth, and he said, no, Ron Brown, nobody's told me when I'm going to speak or anything.
And better yet, on top of all of that, provided some of the more interesting controversy when his name was being bandied about as a possible Ross Perot running mate. And of course, he came up and spoke with you. Didn't quite deny that rumor, at least Monday night.
No, did not. But as we were talking to the governor about how he was being treated, many Virginia delegates didn't like their seats and still don't like them. While I was doing the interview, our executive producer, Bob Pernod, told me the time that he would be speaking. I said, Governor, we've just been told that you're speaking on Thursday. Ron Brown, the chairman of this party, was watching that interview. He was embarrassed.
Got him on the phone, in fact, as I recall, right after you spoke with him. Cleared that matter up, made sure that Governor Wilder knew he was on the list.
And before he starts speaking, very quickly, this man has concerns about Bill Clinton and Al Gore and where they're taking the party. Let's see if he keys on some of those concerns in this address.
I'm proud to be a part of a new commitment to restoring hope and opportunity to all Americans, and who is the embodiment of this new hope and opportunity but our nominees for President and Vice President, Bill Clinton and Al Gore, who are the trustees of the American dream. It is a dream long in the making, but too long denied to many of us. Just last week, I returned from sub-Saharan Africa. There are many people in sight that I will never forget, but one place I visited on my first full day will haunt me forever. On the island of Gorée, off the coast of Senegal, I toured the most notorious slave house of West Africa. This place of human horror, today filled with the same stale dread as Auschwitz, was the hallway of no return, where millions of Africans passed on their way to cargo ships. In the ominous hallway, I saw the endless ocean through their eyes and felt those pangs of hopelessness, fear, and despair. In the compound, I saw how human beings were stuffed into pens, inspected and priced like animals, branded like cattle, and packed into the holds of ships. I heard how families were separated and assigned numbers to take the places of their names. I felt the stigma of the women who were abused by their captors, the hopelessness of men who were holed up in water-filled caves because of their resistance, and the terror of the so-called uncontrollable as they themselves were fed to the sharks. Upon hearing their horror and seeing their inhuman condition, I couldn't help but feel their anger and hopelessness, but I felt something more. Despite all of this inhuman suffering, and despite the pain and evil that it wrought, there is a bit of irony, as Gorée was yet another conduit for admission to a new land. While I was feeling empty, for those who were forced to pass through this spot, I also felt pride for my ancestors and for all who had passed through and had the special place they have in our history. For they overcame obstacles that most workers have never seen and rose up as mighty builders. They raised families, taught values, and helped to build a mighty nation. So they were the true builders of America, and without knowing their tale, the story of this land is incomplete. Who could have known when my ancestors stepped off of state slave ships with chains on their ankles that they were coming to a land of promise? Irish peasants, Jewish refugees, Hispanic laborers, and Asian boat people have been aware of a better tomorrow for their posterity once having reached these shores. As I toured Africa, I could not help but flash back to my own past. I was reminded of how I was born into a segregated society. How even after I served my country in Korea on the front line, I had to leave my own state to attend law school. And how despite all of the obstacles put in my place, I was able to make a good living, raise 3 wonderful children, and with the support of open and fair-minded Virginians, become the nation's first elected African-American governor. And that was done in a place once called the cradle of the Confederacy. Well, now many people say that Virginia can no longer build and create, and that Americans can no longer build and create. But we, the descendants of the builders, know they're wrong. It is the duty and the birthright of all Americans to live up to our forefathers' creeds and their works. They did not live off the fat of the land, but off the sweat of their brows. And an America willing to rest on its laurels will soon become a nation of the complacent and of the cynical. It then falls to our party to fight for the builders and to find a new purpose that unites us all. Abraham Lincoln knew it. We as a nation surely shall perish unless we are united as a people. We Democrats understand that America is at its best with a government that fights for the rights of all of its people and makes a clear purpose that unites us all. A nation that can fight a brutal war to end slavery cannot be frightened by poverty. A nation with the moral authority to declare civil rights for all of its citizens cannot be afraid of lingering racial tensions. We've come too far and we've seen too much, and the limits of our progress are defined only by the limits in our character. We are obliged to stand for an agenda for our future and to fight for that agenda, no matter what our polling data or consultants tell us. We must fight against complacency, whatever the source. George Bush has not led America forward. Sadly, he has led us in circles, and sometimes setting the clock back on our progress. The Bush administration has failed, and not just because George Bush is too liberal or too conservative. Rather, it's been a question of trust. George Bush may be willing to do whatever it takes to win again. And when he was asked as to why he deserved another term as President of the United States, he said, "That's the same question Barbara asked me this morning." And his answer, "We've got to finish what we started." Well, what did he start? Nothing. And what did he finish? Nothing. We cannot allow George Bush to be a failure for America. He can be his own failure. Democrats have led our country to victory in 2 world wars, created a system for peace in the United Nations, and stood up to Soviet aggression through the establishment of NATO. We must continue to bear any burden, any cost, to expand freedom in our world. As a mature democracy and world leader, we have an obligation to play a very vital role, and we cannot sit back and allow those persons to do other things. We are in a position of leadership, and we need to show that progress around the world. Democrats have always been for progress. Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, or anywhere else, helping those people will not help work against us. And we need to do this. We must encourage and take pride in these gains. And let us not forget that their fight was once our fight. Our freedom at home is at risk. An economy is stifled by debt and policies that reward the privileged few. And for the last dozen years, the Republicans have had that trickle down. Nothing new. It's been trickling down ever since Warren G. Harding. We're not going to have that in our country, because we're going to elect our people at the State House, at the courthouse, but the most important thing, we're going to elect Bill Clinton and Al Gore to the White House in 1992. God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Ken Bodie and Bill Schneider, Governor Wilder's state, Virginia, has not gone Democratic. since 1964.
In fact, it was the only southern state that did not go for Jimmy Carter in 1976. It's one of the most conservative southern states, which makes Doug Wilder's election as governor remarkable. Only 18% black, and Wilder, a black man, is the only elected black governor in any state in this century, and in Virginia.
You know, that was a surprising speech to me in a way. I'm wondering when the Democrats are going to begin to tell us about Bill Clinton. They're telling us again and again why the people of this country shouldn't be for George Bush, but they haven't sold us Bill Clinton at this convention yet.
Well, we're certainly going to get an all-important sell from the man himself a bit later this evening. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back.
What if we could make all the clean air and water we need?
What if there was enough food for everyone?
What if we understood the aging process?
What if we cared so much about education we made the most of every mind?
What if research in space made life better on Earth?
We're helping to build Space Station Freedom, the next step in space exploration, and a new way to look at the home planet.
If you'd take a star and put it next to a house, if you could, a star would be like 20 feet bigger than the house. When it's nighttime in our world, it's day in their world.
By providing 70% of all television designed for children, your local cable company is making sure there's more to kids' TV than Saturday morning.
If there's no gravity right now, you can jump all the way over those trees. All of them. Wow.
Every time you buy clothes with the Union label.
Clothes made in the USA.
You're putting people to work. Every time you buy clothes with a Union label. American-made clothes. You're helping people to support their families. And you're getting something great to wear. Every single time you buy the clothes we make. We're the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. We don't just make clothes in our garment factories. We make jobs. That's good for us all.
Around the corner, around the country, at work or play, we're on your way, the convenience stores are Speedway.
Wherever you travel, look for these brands and save on quality gasolines for less, plus a whole lot more. And now get $5 in free gas. Pick up your free Passport to Savings booklet for details and special savings, like Brock's Candies, 2 bags for a special low price, and the Rand McNally 1992 Road Atlas, $4.99.
We're on your way, the convenience stores are Speedway.
CNN's coverage of the 1992 Democratic National Convention is brought to you in part by your local cable operator.
Now, this is nice. Who makes this?
Oh, Pogenpool makes that.
Oh, it is just beautiful. Pogie who?
Germany's Pogenpool. They set the standard for precision engineering, quality, and excellence in kitchen and bath furniture for nearly a century.
Oh, I love it. Now, that's Pogie...
Pogenpool. Listen, just go to Kitchens Incorporated. They offer space planning, interior design, and general contracting. They do it all for your kitchen and bath. So come to Kitchens Incorporated on Wisconsin Avenue in Chevy Chase and ask for...
I know. Pogenpool.
And Kitchens Incorporated.
MPI Business Systems and Sharp Copiers, the winning combination. Your reputation is on the line when you choose copiers, so you've got to have quality products like award-winning Sharp Copiers and Sharp Duplicators. But you also need local service support. So take advantage of MPI Business Systems' documented commitment to service. For peace of mind, more value. MPI Business Systems and Sharp Copiers, the winning combination.
Nissan makes a great family car. Capital sells them for less. Nissan makes them really hot sports car. And Capital sells them for less. Nissan makes a really tough truck. And the Capital price is mighty tough to beat. Because at Capital Nissan, we check our competitors' prices and beat them. Capital Nissan, just 5 minutes south of the University of Maryland on U.S. Route 1 South. The best prices in D.C., Virginia, and Maryland on the Capital Motor Mile.
things were out of control. Lighting awful, heat, what heat? Superintendent's nightmare. So in comes Honeywell. They revamp our lighting controls, our heating and cooling equipment, and suddenly we're saving energy, money, the learning environment. 180-degree turn. This school's come a long way. The kids have to.
Honeywell, helping you control your world.
You're watching Beyond Gavel to Gavel coverage of the Democratic Convention on CNN.
From Madison Square Garden in New York, the site of the Democratic National Convention, here are CNN's Bernard Shaw and Catherine Cryer.
The fourth and final session of these Democrats in convention here at Madison Square Garden. We're told that Governor Bill Clinton is, quote, nervous as a cat as the time approaches when he will take the podium down there and deliver a speech in which he will accept his party's nomination to represent it in this presidential campaign. Presumably, some of that nervousness is rubbing off on Al Gore because he'll precede the governor as he delivers his acceptance speech. But there has been a lot of excitement this day other than here in this hall.
Yes, and I'll bet Bill Clinton was home doing a little rewriting because of this. And of course, the news is that Ross Perot dropped out of the campaign today. And back in the Lone Star State, specifically Big D, Tony Clark is standing by to give us an update. Tony?
Well, you know, the interesting thing, we heard Ross Perot this morning in this room, in fact, just behind me, announce that he was not going to continue his quest for the White House. And that announcement was greeted with surprise, shock, sadness, not only here in Dallas, but in Perot headquarters in various states around the country. And tonight what we've been seeing is some of the reaction of people who say, Ross Perot may say he is leaving the campaign, but they won't let him if there's anything they can say about it. 100 or so people rallied outside the headquarters about an hour or so ago. They sang songs, they chanted, they cheered, they carried signs. The emphasis was all the same, that they wanted Ross Perot to stay in the race.
This world with our Father's grace from on high.
The people have been saying all day, they've been flooding the phone lines here at Perot headquarters with calls of support for Ross Perot. They've been faxing their messages here to Perot. Many of the volunteers say they don't expect it to have much effect in getting him back into the race, but they say they've got to be able to say what they feel. They say they want to be able to show Mr. Perot that despite what polls say, he does have a lot of support around the country. This morning, as Mr. Perot was making his announcement here in another part of the headquarters, Tom Luce, the campaign manager, was with volunteers. They watched in sadness as Mr. Perot was announcing his withdrawal from the campaign. And you could see in Mr. Luce's eyes, he was obviously saddened by this. He told the volunteers at one point, my prayer today is really that you will not give up on what you're trying to do. It has been a difficult and moving time. Mr. Perot told about half a dozen of his senior aides last night at a meeting at his home that he had decided that it was time to withdraw from the race. Mr. Perot said that if there is a good thing that has come out of this, a thing that is most worthwhile, it has been his chance to work with the volunteers.
Being with the volunteers, being with all these wonderful people that make the world go, seeing how much they love their country, seeing how much they want to keep the American dream alive, seeing how much they want to pass it on to the next generation, gives me a sense of comfort I didn't have until I spent a lot of time with them, because I didn't see that at the top. I see it down where the people are, is all of that spirit, is the spirit of 76 is still alive.
But you know, one of the interesting things is some of the volunteers are angry, they are bitter. Some volunteers from Arizona drove to Dallas today, not anticipating Mr. Perot's announcement, but they said they wanted to see the facility, they wanted to show Mr. Perot and his aides the support of people in Arizona. And they said they were frustrated, they were in fact mad at hearing the announcement. They said that they felt let down. Many people had given up jobs, time, effort, and money, and they said Mr. Perot had abandoned them. The decision to abandon the race, Mort Meyerson, perhaps the closest person to Mr. Perot. Meyerson said he was at the meeting last night at Perot's home, and he said the decision to abandon volunteers after all their work on Mr. Perot's behalf was perhaps the hardest thing that faced Mr. Perot.
He knew that he would hurt the volunteers, and the volunteers would have, they'd feel bad about it, and he feels deep regret about that. On the other hand, he had two bad choices. One was, would he hurt the volunteers who have put so much effort in this? He would hate to do that. Would he do something that in his judgment's not good for the country? That's a larger question. He came to the decision that the country came first.
For a lot of the volunteers, that is little consolation. They would put all of their faith in Ross Perot, and now many of them are saddened by what has happened today. I'm Tony Clark, CNN, reporting live from Perot headquarters in Dallas.
Many in the Bush Quayle campaign throughout the past month and a half or so of the Perot star were very critical of that star and very wary of that star. But following the Perot announcement today in Dallas, a different reaction. Mary Tillotson is in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
President Bush was making a bid for those Ross Perot supporters almost as soon as Perot dropped out of the race. He called Perot to congratulate him for, as Mr. Bush put it, energizing all those volunteers. Then the president summoned reporters and television cameras to him so he could start the courtship of Perot conservatives in earnest.
But I see this as a positive development in a sense, because I am convinced that the conservatives who are supporting Ross Perot, the legions of conservative people, will end up being with me, because I think they share the same values that I speak about, the same principles that we put forward, and the same desire to change this economy and get things moving again. So
there are principles on which Perot and the president disagree, too. Perot thinks abortion should be legal. Bush does not. Perot is a vehement critic of the Gulf War to reinstate the Emir of Kuwait, and an even harsher critic of the huge federal debt driven up during the Reagan and Bush administrations. But Mr. Bush says the sluggish economy is the chief reason for voter disenchantment this year, and he predicts more Perot voters will side with him than with Bill Clinton on that issue, especially after Republicans like Bush advisor Charlie Black try and persuade Perot's people that Clinton is a closet liberal.
Now, his supporters will soon get a chance to see a side-by-side comparison in a two-way campaign of the president's approach, his proposals for change, versus Mr. Clinton's liberal tax and spend approach.
All the publicity surrounding the Democratic convention in New York has produced a jump in the polls for Clinton, but Republican National Chairman Rich Bond professes not to be worried.
Bill Clinton has gotten his bounce way too early in this campaign. The electoral map comes in and works for us again.
Some of the states where Perot's exit is expected to help Mr. Bush's electoral math: California, Florida, and Texas. Perot had taken a deep bite out of Bush support in those conservative states, which are crucial to a Bush re-election. In the next couple of days, President Bush will continue wooing those Perot people, telling them in campaign speeches he shares their frustration about gridlock in Washington, but the way to cure it, he'll say, is to vote out of office all those Democrats in Congress, not him. Mary Tillotson, CNN Live in Jackson Hole, Wyoming.
Thanks, Mary. And Deborah Potter's been down on the floor talking to delegates. Deborah?
Yes, and with me is someone who is wearing two hats at this convention. He is an FOB, which means he's a friend of Bill, and he's a member of the Michigan delegation, former Governor Jim Blanchard. Let me ask you about the equation and how it changes now that Ross Perot is out of the race. What happens now, as far as you see it, in the Midwest and nationally in the race?
Well, I think in the long term, it means that you only have one chance to change our government, one chance to have a new future, a new beginning. That's Bill Clinton. You don't have two choices. And because most people want a change in the White House, want a future, want to get America moving again. I think Bill Clinton will benefit. In the short term, however, there'll be some problems, some adjusting. And I'm afraid the campaign will turn negative because the Bush people have given every indication they're going to have their nose in the gutter.
What does Bill Clinton have to do to get the Perot voters to come over his way? Most of them, at least according to the polls, were Republican, conservative kinds of voters. Why would they want to go to Bill Clinton?
Well, because Bill Clinton's a practical man. He's not an ideologue, but he's a practical man. He believes in having the government take an active role and making our economy #1 again. He's run things. He's balanced budgets. There's a lot he can do, but the most important thing he can do, really, is to give a great speech tonight, and I think he'll do that.
You have talked to him over this week and watched his mood as the week goes on. You saw him last night after that triumphant visit to the convention floor. I assume he was pretty pumped up. Is there any sign of nervousness about this speech?
I didn't get any. I saw him last night late privately. He was relaxed. He was happy. He looked like a young man who just hit a Grand Slam home run in the World Series, and he didn't look nervous at all. I saw him earlier testing the microphone earlier today, and he looked very relaxed, very much in control. And I am just thrilled to be here and looking forward to tonight's speech, both by Bill Clinton and Al Gore.
Well, he obviously has to hit a home run tonight, and we'll be listening for what he has to say. Back to the booth.
Former Governor Blanchard saying that Bill Clinton looked relaxed and very much in control, but again, Senator John Breaux of Louisiana said that Bill Clinton, when he talked to him, saw him, he was, quote, nervous as a cat, which is understandable. Frank Sesno is in the Colorado delegation.
I am, Bernie, and we're going to start here with Congresswoman Pat Schroeder on a somewhat personal note. When we were just talking up away the time here, you said it's time for women to run the convention. Well, now, if a woman ran the convention, how would this spectacle be different? What do you suggest?
Well, I would really hope that we get out into the community more. I went out and worked in Harlem with a lot of teens, and I was amazed. I heard more from them that made me really think than you can hear from a whole lot of speeches from pros. And I think maybe some kind of a listening thing rather than just transmitting. We do a lot of transmitting, and the question is how much receiving do we do?
Good question. Let me ask you, you know, there is so much attention now being placed on Ross Perot, his dropping out, how that changes the math. You've been on that podium a great deal during these last several days. Does it detract from Clinton's night?
No. In fact, I think it gets a whole lot more people to listen a lot more carefully on Clinton's night. I think a lot of people who kind of divorced George Bush politically, it's going to be very hard for them to go back and say, let's reconcile. And they either get forced with dropping out or they have to look at Clinton.
You've been talking a great deal about women in this election year. It's such an unpredictable year, has been so far. How does that affect your plans and your prognostication on the presidential race?
Well, I think it's a volatile year. I think women are going to be very important in this election because of the George Bush veto record. And the veto record is unbelievable. He's vetoed almost everything, in fact, everything that has been one of the work and family issues. So I think women are going to say they collect taxes from us equally, but isn't that interesting? The federal government refuses to ever listen to us.
So we can expect to be hearing a family values theme from the Democrats as well. All right, let's go back to the booth. Catherine?
Thanks, Frank, and we'll have more on this Democratic National Convention from the Garden right after this.
CNN's coverage of the Democratic National Convention is brought to you by Merrill Lynch. We have the knowledge and the resources to provide you the answers you need. Merrill Lynch, we're bullish on the future.
The country mouse and the city mouse. There are opportunities close at hand, and Merrill Lynch mutual funds to help you grasp them. But there are advantages in venturing farther afield. And to help you manage the risk and explore the world's possibilities, Merrill Lynch offers a wide choice of global mutual funds. The moral is to expand your rewards, expand your horizons.
From Walt Disney Pictures, the man who 2 years ago did the unthinkable. Honey, I Shrunk the Kid. Is at it again with a bigger laugh and a bolder experiment.
All right, I confess, I did it.
Did what?
I blew up the baby.
How'd you take it? Not like usual.
Rick Moranis.
Adam, put Daddy down.
Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Stop before someone gets hurt.
Rated PG. Starts Friday, July 17th at a theater near you.